Next, from the State Fair, we talk with Representative Elaine Nekritz, chair of the House Pension Committee, about the ongoing negotiations to reduce the cost of state pensions. This runs about 7 minutes.
Representative Elaine Nekritz, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you, Terry. Delighted to be here.
And we're here at the State Fair, Governor's Day, the day that typically the Democrats fire up their troops for the fall campaign. And yet today, the governor, almost every Democrat that came, with the exception, I think, of Jesse White, was roundly booed, and really going to the efforts that you've been heavily involved with, is this effort at reforming the cost of pensions for the state. We'll get into the pensions. Give me first your reaction to what you saw and heard today at the State Fair.
Well, I was toward the back of the crowd, and I could not hear the governor, but for the boos. So, you know, it was a very loud and contentious event today, for sure. And I can certainly appreciate the views of those that are here today and how angry they are that something that they were expected and told it was going to be there for them is in fact probably going to be changed. But the unfortunate reality is that the math doesn't add up. We can't keep the promises we had and fund ongoing services for state government. So, you know, we probably have to make changes on both sides of that equation. We've started, you know, on the budget side of making some cuts, and we are seriously engaged in a debate on how to make those cuts for the pension payment. If I can just give you one number, in the current fiscal year, the pension payment increased $1 billion. Our total new revenues are $750 million. We think it's going to be pretty comparable next year. So for the pension payment to grow $2 billion in 2 years, when our total discretionary spending is in the neighborhood of $16 billion, you know, that's a very heavy burden for us.
Right, and there's only so much money to go around. You're either going to spend it on pensions for maybe somebody who's retired in Florida, and we're not saying critical of them, but the state taxpayer doesn't get any services from that dollar.
Well, whether they're in Florida or Illinois, Illinois does not tax pension income, public employee pension income, or private pension income, so we don't get any revenue out of that either way.
Now, with the anger of the crowd, what is it you think that they don't get, or why do you probably talk to any number of state workers with your involvement? We should say you're the chairman of the House Committee on Pensions and Personnel. So with all your involvement on this issue, when you've talked to the union members, what is it that they're telling you, and what would you say perhaps they don't understand?
Okay. Well, there's a group that says it's a promise made and it has to be a promise kept. And certainly I don't like looking anybody in the eye and saying I can't keep the promise that I made you, and this is not a vendetta for me, at least against public employees. It is simply that I don't have the fiscal wherewithal to keep that promise, and so I have to make a choice between bad and worse, and I'm trying to find a choice that will actually save the pension systems, make them sustainable, and so that we know that a check will be there 20 years from now. I don't have confidence right now that those who are going to be in the system 20 years from now will be getting a check unless we take some steps. Then there's a second group of employees who say, look, we know something has to be done, we get it, and here are some suggestions on how we think it can be done. And I find those conversations, you know, it's an interesting contrast between those two groups, but I definitely hear from both of them.
Now, we're taping this on the 15th. This is a Wednesday. On Friday, the lawmakers will be back in to vote perhaps on a pension bill. This will air after that, but so it's a little bit odd in the timing, but tell us, as far as what needs to be done in the larger context, what is your best guess as we stand here on the 15th of August of when any substantive change will occur?
Well, I don't think that it's my view that we will not be voting on a pension bill on Friday the 17th. Be it a smaller version or a more comprehensive version, something that the Senate passed late in May, or something that that the governor and the speaker have frankly both proposed. So that being said, even if we do vote on a smaller version, we still have 70% of the systems left to deal with, and that is obviously the majority of it, and we can't let that go too long. So the basic structure is something that we agree with on a bipartisan basis. We have some issues like who's going to pay the the forward-going cost of the pensions, and some things like that, and whether there should be increased employee contributions. We have some disputes like that. To me, those can be resolved, but we have to come together in good faith to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, and I'd like to get your reaction to see if we're on target here. Both sides, in other words, the House, or rather I should say Democrats and Republicans in both parties, know something has to be done. So everyone's on board with change.
Yes.
And as you just said, you've agreed in principle on certain aspects. This gets to be very complicated, so I'm glossing over it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But you're still at odds perhaps on some key issues, and one of those is the cost shifting going forward.
Yeah.
One of the cost shifts would be local school districts, as it's proposed. One would be, I think, to colleges and universities for their pensions. Let me just throw it back to you on those issues. Give us both your own thoughts, and where do you think that where we are as far as resolving those issues between the different members of the House and Senate.
And it is a cost shift, but I prefer to talk about it in terms of accountability, because what we're really looking to do is, from a policy perspective, is make sure that the organization setting the wages and salaries and wages and benefits pays for all the consequences of that. So you can't just bump up salaries as much as you want and then send the bill for the pensions to the state, because that misalignment of incentives has really created a big chunk of the unfunded liability we have. So it is an accountability measure. I don't think its primary goal is to actually get someone else to foot the bill. The primary goal is accountability. So that being said, I feel like we are both sides have dug their heels in on this one. There's a lot of flexibility, I think, on the House Democrat side as to how the shift can occur, over what period of time, what's the total amount. I think we're pretty flexible on all that, but the Republicans have just said the whole issue is a non-starter, and
the whole issue of cost shift.
The whole issue of cost shift and accountability is a non-starter, and that's troubling, because I don't think that we can actually fully address the pension issue unless we have that accountability built into the solution.
I have talked to some at both the college level but also at the school level, administrators. Their fear is, yes, we set the salaries, but it would still be the legislature that would be setting the pension benefits, and they fear that in some future campaign season they might have the same thing happen where it's happened in the past, where some unions might come, give donations to some future lawmakers, the legislature raises the benefit structure, and then the schools, while they set the salary level, are going to have to pay more. So they're saying, we would have the accountability of paying it, but we're still not going to have the accountability of the cost. The legislature would. What would you respond to that?
So 3 things I would say to that. One is that we have an initiative on the ballot this November that would change the Illinois Constitution so that any enhancement in a benefit, a pension benefit, would require a 3/5 majority. So that if that be the
what is it currently?
Currently, it's a simple majority. So, and under most general assemblies, that would be a bipartisan effort to.
So let me just drive that home.
Sure.
This is a constitutional amendment that people will vote on. The people have to approve that constitutional amendment.
They do.
But if it passes, it's going to be harder for a legislature to raise the benefits in the future.
That is the plan. And,
again, I just wanted to underscore that.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. Okay, yeah. And second, that's the structure for the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund right now. Is the state sets the benefits and the municipalities pay for it. And actually, it works very well with IMRF. They're very well funded. They have a very dedicated mechanism by which they're funded, and we don't have problems with IMRF. We do have problems with police and fire. I agree to that.
The mayors would say again, because the lawmakers did that to them.
But then we go back to the 3/5. Yeah. And I think that there is I think that 5 years ago the level of dialogue we're having on pensions wasn't occurring at all. No one really understood the depth of the problem. Now we really get it, and we really get that there are consequences to the decisions we make here. So I think that there's some dynamic changes that will make us much more sensitive to those kinds of issues.
Well, Representative Elaine Nekritz, thank you for joining us on the Illinois Channel and sharing your views.
I appreciate it.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.